Sometimes the most powerful thing a journalist can do is ask a simple question, because questions do something accusations can't. They invite audience to think. They invite the audience to decide. And when we're talking about the growing tensions between the United States and Iran, those questions matter, because decisions made in Washington and Tehran don't stay in conference rooms. They ripple across the Middle East and sometimes across the world. Here's the first question. Does this strategy actually make the region safer? Supporters of the policies tied to Donald Trump argue that pressure works. Sanctions, military deterrence, diplomatic isolation. The idea is simple. If Iran faces enough economic and political pressure, its leadership will back down. Yeah, okay. It's a theory of deterrence. Make the cost high enough and conflict never happens. I don't subscribe to that by any stretch of the imagination. But critics say the opposite may also be true. That pressure doesn't always calm a situation. Sometimes pressure pushes governments towards retaliation instead of compromise. So the question becomes unavoidable. Are these policies preventing conflict? Are these policies preventing conflict or slowly building toward a new one? History tells us something unconfrontable about international crises. Escalations rarely begins with one dramatic moment. Most often, it happens through a series of smaller steps. A sanction here, a military deployment there, a response wherever, then another response, each side believing it is acting defensively, each side believing the other side started it, and suddenly the situation becomes harder to control, which leads to the second question. Is this strategy containing Iran or provoking a wider conflict? Supporters argue that strong action sends a message. Yeah, you just don't want to know what that message is. That hesitation invites aggression. That deterrence only works if it's credible. But critics warn that constant escalation creates instability. I will be among those people. Because when diplomatic space disappears, countries sometimes fall back on the one tool they believe remains: force. And in a region already shaped by decades of conflict, the risk becomes enormous. The Middle East isn't isolated. Energy markets run through it. Trade routes run through it. Global alliances run through it, which means decisions involving Iran don't just affect one country. They affect allies. They affect global markets. As master of the deal, you would think that he would understand benefits of the global market. And they affect millions of ordinary people who have nothing to do with the politics behind it. Which brings us to the third question. What happens if escalation goes wrong? In this case, we bomb them, they bomb us, we bomb them, and the entire region goes to war? Who knows? We'll see. Foreign policy often operates on the assumption that leaders can control events. But history shows something else. Crises don't always follow the script. a miscalculation, a misunderstanding, a military incident no one intended. And suddenly, a regional standoff becomes something far larger. Wars in the modern world rarely begin with a declaration. They begin with momentum. That's why analysts across the political spectrum keep returning to the same concerns. Strategy isn't just strength, it's an outcome. If the goal is sustainability, then the real test isn't rhetoric. The real test is whether tensions rise or fall. So when we look at policies involving Iran, the real debate isn't simply about toughness. It's about effectiveness. Does pressure produce negotiations? No, it doesn't. Or does pressure produce retaliations? Yes, it does. Does isolation weaken a government? Yeah, it really does. Or strengthen hardliners inside of it? It does that too. These are difficult questions, but they're also necessary ones, because foreign policy decisions don't happen in theory. They happen in real world, where misjudgments cost lives, where elections spread quickly, escalations spread quickly, and where consequences of a single policy decision can shape the entire region for decades. So instead of pretending there are easy answers, maybe the most responsible thing we can do is keep asking the questions. Does this make the region safer? Does it reduce the chance of war? And if escalation continues, who ultimately pays the price? Because when leaders gamble with geopolitical tensions, the stakes are never abstract. They are measured in human lives. Which is why war is bad. Anyway, and that is Scott for 2028.